Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to scrape some news article from the web. And in order to do so, I'm going to use some code that Miguel provided for us, and which is kind of nice that we can reuse. And what we want to do is we'll go to this newspaper called The Guardian in the UK. And what we're going to do is we're going to write some code that grabs some of these titles, that grabs the link to the content, and then grab the content. And we're going to loop over and translate it. So first thing we want to do is we want to go to The Guardian, which is this newspaper here. These are all the titles I'm looking for. So if you drill in to this title, for example, you're going to see this. So here is where the story is. And also, in order to get to this page, you needed a URL to link over to it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to right click and I'm going to say view page source. When you do, you're going to end up like this. And what I do is to find out what a title is, I say, okay, when good TV goes bad, I go into the page source and I'm simply doing Control F to find. And then I start typing like when good, okay, here's something, when good TV goes bad. So when I look at this, it appears to be sitting in an H3 class called FC item title. And there's also a link in here, href. So this is kind of what I'm looking for here for the first page. So what I'm going to do in my code, I'm going to say, hey, create a request. Here's your URL that points to this newspaper. Get the data using this library called Beautiful Soup and looking for these end tags. It looks for position in all this HTML and stuff that it can locate it. So it grabs all the information and creates this object. And then what I do is I'm looking for all the H3 of this type of class, and I'm simply loading it into this variable. And that will find all of these titles and put them into that variable. So it gets all of this. So when I do that and I run this stuff, you can see it produced 100 article titles. So what I want to do next is I want to reduce the number. So I'm going to only select 10 of them. I don't want to need more. This is just for later when I'm going to show you the output. So don't worry about that. That just sets the column width within this notebook. Here is the code that we are going to be running to get going on this stuff. Okay, so now we're going to load all the information. So I'm setting up 3 list objects, one for the content, one for the links, for the URLs that takes us to the story itself, and one for the titles. And I'm going to set up a Numpy array that uses a sequential method. So I'm creating a variable called n that's going to basically create a sequence of numbers here between 0 and 9, because I set this article to be 10, but it won't include the last one. So it's going to go up through 1 through 10, starting at 0, ending up at 9. So I'm creating a variable for that. There are some if statements here in case you see some kind of live page. We're going to ignore that. Then I need to get the link of the article, meaning to go to the content, I need the link. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for this cover page news. First article I'm looping over here, that will be 0. And then I'm going to look for ahref. And that I explained that in a previous video where we're looking for the links. So it's going to grab the link and it's going to append it to this links list. Then it's going to do the same thing for the titles, find the titles and get the text, and then add it to this list titles list. And finally, we're going to get the article from running this request get method, passing in the link. And you're inside a loop here, so it grabs one link at a time. And then we're going to load the article's content of the text into this variable here. Now we have to filter out some stuff because there's a lot of stuff in each one of these that we don't need. So we're going to grab all the stuff in the content. And what we're going to do is we're going to use Beautiful Soup. We're going to find this position, and you can read up more about that here. And there's line numbers. It tells you what this HTML5 lib does. So you can read up on that. You can see the URL over here. Then what I want to do is find all the divs that has this class. And how do I know it's this class? Well, if I go into the article and I look at the actual content here, if I hover over here, you can see it highlights. And the way I got to this point is simply point to this page and hit F12. And then this piece shows up over here. Then I'm inside the Elements tab. And as I hover over here, you can see it highlights stuff. So what it tells me is, okay, there's something here that is called content main column, content main dash column, article JS, content main column. So there's something up here I can use that covers the whole thing. And within each one of these, I want the text. Here's some text. So if I scroll down a little bit more, you can see here's some more text. Here's a figure, and so on. So I'm interested in all these paragraphs here. That's what I'm going to extract out of here. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm searching for a div that has this class. And then from there, I'm grabbing all the paragraphs and I add them into my list paragraphs. And that's what this little extra loop does down here. It joins it in. And then finally, I'm adding everything into this news content. So now I got a list of everything, all the content of each article. Okay, so we talked about this creating lists for all of the titles, the links, and the contents. And we used a Numpy array to create the sequence. In case you wonder, the Numpy array does something like this. Creates a variable in the Numpy array arrange method between 0 and 5 and print it out. And then I do a second loop, but this time I have my starting position, end position, and then I go by step by 2. So if you run this, it will look like this. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice it does not include 5, but it starts at the start page, start the number of 0. Second one, I'm doing increments of 2, so I go 0, 2, 4, because 5 is not included. So that's what that sequence is doing, in case you wonder. Another thing you might wonder about is, in the code here, I use this request, right? There was the request. And if you wonder about how you can figure out some more about this stuff, put a question mark in front of it. That means like hey, call the help. And if you look at this help here, you can see more about the function itself. If I, for example, want to look at this find all from Beautiful Soup, I can click here and it gives me this stuff here, okay? And if I wanted some more information about it, I could, another trick is you can highlight it, hover over it, and then click, control and click, and then you're getting some more information about it. And if I scroll up here, I also notice that there's a lot of information here that talks about all the functions and stuff within that library. So that's one way you can do it. Another thing I noticed too was if I double click here and click on it, holding down the control key, there's some links showing up here. And one of them, those links says, there's a doc, okay? So if I press my control key and says follow link, I click on it, and that's the one that took me to the actual documentation here for Beautiful Soup. And then it's a matter of going in here and finding the function you're interested in. So that's how you can get to some of these libraries. Okay, so there's a little bit about help. Now that we have the titles, let's print it out, see what it looks like. So I'm going to create a data frame using the Panda library from, you might recall the Panda library that creates a data frame, more like a spreadsheet kind of look and feel. And that's the one I imported up here along with the NumPy. So if I run this now and create a data frame, then I will, using Panda, create a data frame, add a dictionary in here, and write it out and show it. So, okay, list titles is not found. List title, let me run it again. Got to make sure everything was run. So let me see if it's working now. Okay, so here's a list of those 10 titles that I grabbed. So you can see here, This is what it came back with. So what we can do now is we're going to take those articles that we created and we're going to actually translate them. So that's what I'm going to do next. Okay, now that we got our articles here, the next thing I want to do is to create a function that's going to do the translation. And then I want to set up some code here that's going to create a loop and translate the article into different languages. So if you look at this function here called get language description, I'm passing in the language code and the language. And this is the key to do the translation. This is just for pretty the printout so you can see it easier. I create an instance of this translator object that you got from the Google Trans library. My source is English because I'm taking it from this UK newspaper called The Guardian. And so all the articles are in English. And the destination language is going to be equal to this variable here that's going to be passed into this function. So it's going to be for every language you're going to call this function. The language code is my destination. So the source code is the source is English, and the destination is whatever language I'm passing in. And I'm going to from my data frame that I created using the panda here for this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all the rows and the article title. So that's all I care about from that data frame is this column here. And I'm going to set up an empty data frame where I'm going to set up a new column in the data frame. So I'm going to append for every language. I'm going to append the language that I'm passing in is going to be part of this. That will be coming in here, the destination language. And then I'm going to do a for loop. I'm going to have the index and the actual row from the data frame. I'm going to iterate over them. I'm setting up a new variable called text. I'm calling the translator, and I translate. And whatever the article is, meaning here's one, and so forth, I'm going to pass that in here. That's the text I'm going to translate. This is the source language. This is the destination language. And I'm going to grab the output text that comes from the translator. Then I'm going to append that new column to each row inside the data frame. So pass in the text there. It was empty before. Now I'm going to add a text to it. Then I'm simply going to print out the results by using this tabulate. And that's the one I used up here for pretty output when I set the column width to 120. So that's what that one is doing. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to basically print out the data frame. And here's the headers I'm going to use. And then I'm adding some destination language on the fly and call it translation. So here is my list of country codes and the language I'm interested in. So I created a tuple for each one and put inside a list. And then I'm setting up some parameters, like S is going to be what I'm going to repeat with in my printout. This is the number of these kind of repeat signs I want to use inside my print. And then for each language in this list, this is just a variable I use, equivalent to this element. Print a new line, print the language that you're on, which is this, and so forth, to uppercase, and then join each character N, which is this 180 of them, with the repeater S. So that's what this one does. It joins it in and creates a long string. And then I'm calling my function here for each language, passing in the code, which is this first list tuple, item in a tuple. And then the second one is this language 1, position 1. So this position 0 and this position 1. And then when I run it, you can see it prints out nicely each language. So I got Hindi, Greek, French, Finnish, and so on. So it prints it to English and that language. So that's what that one is doing.